podcast of the 48-hour competition, where teams all around Aotearoa write, shoot and edit a film in 48 hours. Richard Falkner has entered the 48 hours 11 times. He has taken on many roles, including writer, actor, sound design, and writing and performing original scores. This year, Richard took on a mountain of a challenge. He made a film in 48 hours by himself. He signed up for Ultra, which meant he had to make a sequel to a previous film. And he was also parenting his 3-year-old son for some of the weekend. His film was called Scobies, and its original and bizarre plot featured two kombucha jars and their scobies plotting to take over a host body. If it sounds strange, it is. In this episode, Sam Harris from Squint Eastwood talks to Richard Falkner from the Wellington team, Temple of Solitude.
Okay, welcome to the official 48 Hours podcast. My name's Sam Harris. I'm from the team Squint Eastwood, and joining me today is a man who's been involved in several successful teams, both large and small, Richard Falkner. Hello, Richard.
Hello, Sam. How's it going?
Good. How are you doing today?
Woo, very good. It's slightly early. It's a Saturday morning.
We're conducting this interview from opposite sides of the globe, me being based in London and Richard in Wellington.
Yeah, opposite time zones.
Yep, lots of fun. How long have you been doing the competition, Richard?
Let's see. So my first year was 2004, which I think was the second year that there was a Wellington competition or something like that. I'd got back from... I just moved back from Melbourne. I've been living over there for 3.5 years, and just before I came back, I was staying at my friend Toby and Melissa's place. And about a week before I came back, they were like, "Hey, there's this weird competition. We're thinking of entering it. Do you want to do that?" And so I came back, and the night after I got back, we started 48 Hours. That was Empire of Reason. And so that was a name that Toby just invented when he did his entry. And our first entry was our most successful one for years. How to deal with the situation. So that was a sort of a throw together of really small team. It was the three of us, Toby, Melissa and I, and Toby's little brothers, one little brother, Tom, who shot it, and Nula came in for a shot, and my friend Steph came in for a shot, and Dick White, who lectures in film, I think, at Vic now. He was living through the wall, and he came over and wrote it with us, and he was, an epic writer. And, that was cool. We made this little film called How to Deal with the Situation. This is back in, DV tape days.
I miss those days.
Yeah. Oh, man, I don't miss that last hour of the competition. That was horrible. Printing to tape. Jesus.
Oh, yeah, I'm happy we don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah. Very, very 4x3. Very, 720 by 576. Excuse me, I'm probably a bit snuffly. We made this little educational video. It was the year 2004 was Terry Spears. You had to have a baby. You had to have the line, put that down nice and easy. We got educational film. We did this weird sort of surreal educational thing. And we got second in Wellington. And we got second to Heinous Crime by Taika.
Oh, brilliant.
Which was... obviously, epic and hilarious. But it was kind of conspicuously lo-fi, which was awesome. But there was a bit of a, people got a bit in a, thing about that it was lo-fi and it won, which obviously it was hilarious. So, yeah. But so we came second to that. So that's sort of, that was a bit of an epic start. And, it was a long build to equal it.
So you've entered every year since then? You haven't skipped a year?
No, I've skipped a couple of years. I think we did the year after that, and then we did the year after that, and then I think I skipped a year, and then the year after that, I think was my first year with Traces of Nut.
Yeah, so tell me about working with Traces of Nut. How did that come about?
Right, so Traces of Nut was Dean caught up with me. I think it was 2007, and he tapped me to be in his play Brainpower, which was at Bats for Fringe, and he'd seen how to deal with the situation because he was a 48 Hours early adopter as well, and and he loved that. He'd always thought that was great. So he's one of these people that really gets keeps he and his ear close to the ground on 48 Hours for a long time, and so he was keen on that, so that was rad, and had a read of that, and it was epic. So jumped in, and then Dean and I sort of, I did a lot of stuff with Dean from there on in. Yeah, that would have been the first year we did it with Ruth as well.
Was that Half a Horse?
Yeah, that was Half a Horse. So that was, sort of an unfortunate start.
Well, I mean, you could say that, but I think Half a Horse has got a reputation as a bit of a classic of the competition, really.
Yeah, true. Despite never having been in competition, because
we'll talk a bit about more about that in a minute. The whole being out of the competition thing.
Yeah.
From stride to stride with Traces of Nut, obviously the team has done very well over the years, and it took out the whole competition in 2013. What was that like?
Yeah, that was huge, because obviously 48 Hours had been pretty defining for in our late 20s, and I guess early 30s. 48 Hours became quite a big thing, really. And out of the 48 Hours competition came the Make My Movie thing, which was a second competition that Ant ran, where you had the potential to win $100,000 to make a feature film, as you know, as you were involved in it. We were lucky enough to enter and win that as Traces of Nut. Based on pretty much a team.
Do you think your success with 48 Hours helped you kind of nab that victory with Make My Movie?
I'd say it absolutely built the team, 100%. So that was awesome. And I mean, that's a really good example of how Ants, how 48 Hours and Make My Movie as a further thing to that really is like a really foundational way of actually building New Zealand's film community. So we'd just come off the back of that. We'd had this completely insane year of making this film just full-time on no money sort of thing, and so we were probably as much of a well-oiled team as you could really hope for. And of course for 48 Hours we sort of had to step away from some of the kind of bells and whistles that we'd had and go back to sort of 48 Hours thing, but we were just kind of came back together and smashed it out, and it was just one of those things where you're kind of like, ooh, this is a good combination of things. I was a bit tired and had a few too many beers on writing night, if I'm going to be completely honest, and there was times when I was pretty unconvinced that I wasn't a great cog in the writing machine on that entry, I have to say, but it was pretty cool. And as soon as you saw it coming together, it was like, sweet, this is definitely got potential.
There's always that thing when you're making a film, isn't it, where when it's kind of in pieces, that's when you feel the darkest about it, and you're like, oh, I really don't see how this is going to work. But then as more and more of it gets shot or made, and you start to see it take form, then you just get so excited and so pumped. Yeah,
totally. It's that phrase, the sum being more than its parts. Right, hang on. Again, this is an early morning, haven't had enough coffee thing. Being more than the sum of its parts, I think. But like when you've got all the bits, like you say, on the floor, the jigsaw pieces. And it's that thing of like, there's the writing stage and the shooting stage and the edit stage all being quite distinct, and this being prepared to let the story shift.
Yeah.
But I mean, of course, it's not so much the case of 48 Hours, but but when you see it coming together and when, things, those sort of epic layers of sort of finish, like when the first time you see the edit sort of tight, and you're like, ooh, that works. And then you start getting sound effects or visuals in there, and, it starts all, and you get those moments where you hear the sound design for the first time, and you're like, oh, wow, that gives it so much more weight and depth, or soundtrack, score, and all those additions
So that's a good point. Could you just tell me a bit about some of the roles you played? Because people in Wellington will obviously know you as an actor, but you also do sound design, and you're a writer as well?
Yeah. So I do. I've been writing with Traces of Nut since Half a Horse, and on and off, and with Empire of Reason, and did How to Meet Girls, which was pretty epic. And Dean and I are still doing a bunch of writing, and still do sound design and recording stuff, kind of home studio kind of styles. I've been doing that for years, and that sort of took a little bit of a hiatus when we had a kid a couple of years ago. As is kind of common. But sort of getting back into that to a certain extent these days, doing still sound design and stuff, which is heaps of fun. And little bit of music. I used to do a fair bit of scoring and music and bits and pieces, which has taken, I'm sadly still on hiatus from music to a large extent, doing a little bit of music.
And Kazam Blam.
Yeah, Kazam Blam hasn't seen any action. Well, he made it off the planet and he's never come back.
Shame.
Which is a bit of a bummer. Hopefully he'll come back one day.
I hope so too. So after 2013 and the big success that was The Sleeping Plot, you actually went back to Empire of Reason. You kind of stripped it back and had a small team with Toby again. What made you decide to do that?
Well, that was kind of like I totally just missed Toby and making stuff with Toby, apart from anything else. But also it was kind of like I'd been doing heaps of stuff with Dean and Traces of Nut. Like we'd just been through that whole Make My Movie grinder and stuff. And so like I sort of had been to kind of, obviously not big scale, but in terms of my kind of worldview at the time, it's kind of a much bigger machine. And in terms of the 48-hour kind of origins, I was kind of, part of me wanted to get back to that tiny little kind of two-man kind of scenario. The smaller team sort of thing. And that combined with wanting to work with Toby again made me want to go back to Empire of Reason. And yeah, Toby he's only into the competition just for the fun of it, just for basically, just coming up with an insane idea on Friday night and then just seeing how ridiculous he can make it by Sunday night sort of thing, which is a cool philosophy, I think. And I think it's I find it heaps with music when you're listening to bands that start off really lo-fi and then as they get more successful they get more and more bells and whistles in the recording studio and become sort of polished into this horrible mainstream sort of turd, and it's like I always go back to the early recordings and it's all that nasty, dusty, scratchy recording stuff that always has the magic for me. So it's kind of a desire to kind of actively pursue that.
So going back to it was kind of like doing your follow-up album as kind of a stripped-back acoustic version.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. And it's funny because I've never felt that central to this success. So I never feel like it's like a departure going back to the lo-fi thing. But yeah, anyway. Do
you enjoy being in a small team better? Do you find the kind of creative control like more fun?
Yeah, definitely. It's just different, I guess. I mean, there is the aspect that Traces of Nut is, it's directed by Dean, and it's kind of Dean's predominantly. I think it'd be fair to say it's definitely a collaboration. It's absolutely, but like he's directing and stuff. And I've never, as things have progressed for me, because that first 48 Hours was kind of really my first kind of fully involved film project, really, in a way. I'd sort of done bits and pieces before that, but I'd never made a short film from start to finish. And yeah, so as things have progressed, I've sort of wanted a bit more control as things have gone on a little bit. So sort of, yeah, in a way it's kind of a pursuit of kind of, getting a little bit more of a hand on it myself. But this year is the only year I've actually directed. With Empire of Reason, we've never had, our credits list is always just our names in alphabetical order, I think. We don't even assign credits because we're just like, everybody does everything, which is is absolutely not a recommended way to pursue any kind of creative collaboration.
So tell me about this year. You decided to go from a small team to a very small team.
Yeah, well, I've kind of always wanted to, because with the one-man team, there's just that kind of, I don't know if you get the same thing as a one-man team, but that question of, can I? I want to find out if I even can, because I find like every element of filmmaking fascinating and fun and really satisfying to try. And they're all fun activities, from writing to editing to shooting they're all fun things to do. So I always find whenever I'm on any kind of shoot, I'm always like, have a look at the camera, have a look at the camera department, go, oh, look at them, jealous and look at the art department and go, oh, look at all the fun they have in the art department. It's kind of like my dream is to kind of do all of them, but which is a ridiculous. Yeah. And then there's a logistical question of kind of like, is it actually feasible to get from Friday night to Sunday night and actually do it all yourself?
Well, yeah. I mean, did you find any weak spots that you didn't know you had?
Yeah, so many. Like all of them. Mostly, I mean, I'd say the biggest weak spot is just sustaining your brain and your decision making towards the end of Sunday. It's just like my mind just started completely disintegrating. If I'm gonna be completely honest, like man, I was just like things like ultimately this is probably meant to be the big reveal of the episode for people that don't know, but yeah, ultimately I disqualified myself by not including the Wilhelm scream, and that was just a complete. My mind had just melted by that point, and like I had treated it, I'd already run it through a plugin in Pro Tools and treated it. I reversed it. I knew exactly the spot on my online wrap-up form. I'd put in the time code where I was going to place it, and from there it was just like, you sort of have those sort of mental checklists, and I actually had a physical checklist as well, the handy wrap-up sheet or whatever, and I'd actually, because I'd had it so well prepared, I highlighted it. And from there, and I ended up having another issue with another sound effect that I needed to get because I was doing Ultra and I had to include a sound from a previous film. And that was the one that I was having trouble getting access to. So I got distracted by that and, forgot to put in the original one. So,
man, what was that moment like when you just kind of, like, because you got it in on time, yeah, and then you discovered after the fact that you...
Yeah. I got it in on time and got to the finish line and was talking to a friend at the finish line, and like by that point basically it was kind of like everything I was hearing was kind of like Charlie Brown's Teacher. It was a little bit like that, but I heard Wilhelm scream and I was like and I was like, it was, when you're that sleep deprived, it's kind of a gentle, it's not like a horrible jolt of realization. It was kind of like I don't know, crashing a car with the ABS on, It's like you skid to a halt and you do hit the wall, but it's somewhat buffered by sort of your nice braking system of sleep deprivation. And yeah, it was just like, the Wilhelm scream.
Yeah, I think it's not natural for the human brain to kind of focus on one thing so intently for such a long period of time, and things break. Yeah.
Because you just end up having to switch priorities so much, especially when you're doing it. Yeah, when you're doing the one man show away, it's just like you're just jumping. Got so many hats that you can't. You lose a fedora somewhere along the line, and that's it.
What were some of the other kind of physical challenges of doing a one-man show? Like, how did you do things like get focused on yourself and the camera? Were there any kind of things like that tripped you up?
Yeah, well, that was pretty interesting because, really early on, pretty much as soon as I started shooting, I was setting up, and that's the shoot is where you realize, oh shit, like it really dawns on you that normally I'd be sitting there talking shit and somebody else would be moving lights and stuff. But, normally on a set, it's a hive of activity and one person's checking focus, another person's moving the lights, somebody's watching on a monitor, actors are rehearsing and stuff. But if I was doing anything, then nothing else is happening, essentially. So that was a bit of an issue. But I did have the one salvation I had from that was... did a short film a couple of years ago with Dean and Ruth called Judgment Tavern, in which I play a magically animated severed head, and kind of a key prop for that was the severed head, which is a photorealistic cast of my head rendered in some kind of silicon alginate stuff. And yeah, Ruth got to keep it because she was the producer of the film. So we've got this weird severed version of my head at home. And because I had to do focus checks because it was on DSLR and, you have that depth of focus issue, I had this head and I stuck it on a speaker stand and was able to just actually stick that in the exact position.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, it was awesome. And it was awesome. I'd line it up with like some kind of visual thing that I knew I could, like a mark that I could physically meet if I had to walk into shot or something, like a table edge in the periphery of my vision or whatever. And I'd line it up with that and then get focus and then, take it out and then hit that mark. And it was pretty much meant that I knew I'd have focus every time because like the nose length was exactly right and stuff. So that was pretty handy. So
That's sheer brilliance.
yeah, I was pretty stoked with that. Yeah.
This year they added the optional kind of nightmare mode of doing Ultra for the first time.
Yeah.
Now, this is kind of funny. When I heard about Ultra, I was considering doing it, but I emailed Ruth and I said, hey, look, I'm thinking about doing Ultra, but I'm a one-man solo team. Is there anything in there that's going to kind of screw me? And she said, well, Richard's a one-man team. He's doing Ultra, so if you don't do it, you're a chicken.
That's
and
so evil.
I've got like a Marty McFly thing where that's like a trigger for me, so I had to do it.
Oh, they played us off against each other, bro.
Yeah.
That's exactly what she did to me.
Really?
Yeah, she said, oh, Sam's going to do it.
Oh my God.
I know, evil, eh? And guess what? They did screw us.
Yes,
'Cause
female. I can't. Well, to be fair, that wasn't an Ultra requirement. That was a sort of stock standard requirement.
Well, that's true. But yeah, that was the first sharp intake of breath. I was like, I was like, I knew I'd committed to filming on a DSLR, and I knew that I was the only cast.
Did that help
And
you kind of shape the story?
It did. I mean, it meant that I ended up using 2 female characters as my protagonists.
With speech to text generators?
Yeah. Which, man, that slowed me down to something chronic.
Really?
But the speech to text thing, ended up being a massive thing. Yeah, that was a huge slowdown.
I would have thought you just type it and let it go.
I typed it and let it go, but then it just comes out way too Stephen Hawkins, like for film. Like
Right.
It was like, like, I'm almost ready for you to drink my nectar again, Harper. You mindless ape, man. And every line just sounds like that. And I was like, this sucks. So I had to take it into Ableton and basically modulate I had to automate the emotional modulation of each line. So I'd sort of, with little, with generating little lines in the automation, I'd be, I'm almost ready for you to drink my nectar again, Harper. You mindless ape, man. And total trial and error going back and forth. It was
Automated emotional modulation.
Yeah, took way. And that was one of those things where that was a Sunday afternoon thing. And I was like, I probably could have got by with the Stephen Hawkins version. But I was like, no, I've got to make it perfect. And it's that, no, I've got to make it perfect angle that always kills you in 48 hours. And I didn't have the wherewithal to deal with that at that point.
So let's just talk about all the kind of eggs you had to throw into this pudding with all the different required elements. You had to have a female character. It had to be a sequel to one of your previous films.
Yep.
Was there much of a decision there? Did you know which film you were going to do a sequel from?
No, yeah. So I got so angry when I read that because I was just like, Ruth, you convinced me to do Ultra. Because I should also, probably clarify that whole scenario, that Ruth Corver is my partner and she runs the Wellington competition with Ness Patea. And, so there was kind of, I was like, I have to be a little bit careful to enter and make sure that, I'm not party to anything that could create any real or perceived conflicts of interest or anything,
Of course, yeah.
And of course, the main thing is I have to make sure that I don't somehow cheat. Ruth doesn't tell me anything about it, and she didn't tell me anything about Ultra. I was like, should I do this? Even a little bit, I was like, is this something I want to do, Ruth? And she was just like, no, I can't tell you anything. You just have to decide on your own, which was good. And I did do it. And it totally screwed me. For the first hour, I was actually angry. Like the first couple of texts to Ruth, I was like, angry. Because I was like, my whole plan was the kombucha thing with making a movie about scobies was pretty much, I thought, because I was sort of like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do 48 hours by myself. I need some way of doing this where I can have multiple characters. I was like, am I going to animate it? No, I don't think I can do anything with motion graphics that's going to be successful and I don't think I'll be fast enough. So I was like, what if I just stuck weird faces on top of scobies and made a weird movie about scobies? And I was like, yeah. I was pretty high at the time, and I was like, yeah, that's going to be great. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to do that. And then into Ultra, and it's like you've got to make a sequel to one of your previous films, and I'm like, And at that point, I was like, So yeah, my options at that point were scrap the scobies and do how to deal with the situation. And in terms of the other things that I had to include, so I got Christmas movie.
That's a bummer right there.
Yeah, I know. I was just like, oh, fuck. Christmas movie, and had to have a female character. So I'm sort of boned by those two already. Had to make a sequel to a previous film. And yeah, tough gigs. And also, I didn't read the instructions very well because I was a bit panicky. And my interpretation, I actually still think this is the best interpretation of the rule, was that if you actually read that sentence literally of the Ultra description, you have to go back, you use the genre from your 2017 entry, and then you go back and use the required elements from the year that you're making a sequel of.
Yeah.
Well, by my interpretation, the genre is one of the elements.
I thought that too.
So I redid... Yeah, so I reused the genre as well. Just to be careful. So I ended up making a cat and mouse Christmas movie. So I was like, okay.
And you had to have two compulsory technical elements that were kind of in conflict with each other. Is that right? Like a smash cut and a match cut?
Yeah, I did 2015, so it was a match cut, and then 2017 was the smash cut. Yeah, I mean, that didn't worry me too much because they're just kind of like, you can just, you can do them in post if you want, really. But
yeah.
Although I ended up stabilizing a few things and trying to, I actually accidentally stabilized one of my match cuts, smash cuts out of the film.
Crash, zoom cuts.
Yeah. I did one of them in camera and I accidentally stabilized that out of existence. But fortunately I had another one, so I didn't disqualify myself twice.
In the credits of your film, you mention thanks to some last minute post-production support from Toby. So what happened there? What was the moment where you realised you kind of had to call in the A-team?
Oh man, okay. So one thing was that, like, having a 3-year-old, I was like, there's no way. Like, Ruth was going to be away Friday night doing the launch, so I watched that from home. My son Red was actually out of the house on a sleepover, thanks to old Traces of Nut friends, Bonnie and Eugene Beckinsale, so I didn't actually have Red, so that was good. So I was able to write on Friday night, but to keep myself free of distractions for the rest of the weekend, Toby and Melissa have a little bed sit underneath their house, so I went and borrowed that. And Toby kept on coming down and checking on me and, touching base and bringing me bits of coffee and whatnot. And so he popped down at one point and he was like, he just couldn't resist. On the night, I showed him the rough cut on Saturday night, and he was like, this is cool. And he was like, do you want me to just quickly go through and tighten a couple of things? I was like, oh, yeah, if you want, that'd be cool. And he was like, it's just, it's not really help. You don't have to put me in the credits or anything. And we sort of had a bit of an ethical discussion about it. I was like, cool, at what point, don't do much, because if you do much, then I can say thanks up to a point, and then at some point I'm going to have to give you a credit. And he was like, yeah, no, that's cool.
Yeah.
I'll just tinker around the edges. And then eventually it was, I started getting into the sound. And I think by that point I was kind of balls deep in doing this text-to-speech stuff. And it was taking a lot longer than I anticipated. And at that point I hadn't comped the little eyes on. I'd done one shot of the eyes. So I knew I had the system, I knew how I was going to do it. But he was like, bro, you're not going to have time to do this if you're spending all this time on this. Because we were kind of like midday Sunday sort of at this point. And he was like, nah, I'm going to have to do this. And I was like, yeah, definitely going to have to. Yeah, he basically tightened things up and added the eyes predominantly and the title.
Right.
So yeah, it was an absolute lifesaver. And yeah, it was kind of early to mid Sunday where it became clear that, yeah, it was going to have to be more than just a help. And that was another. He was like, when I was like, dude, I'm gonna have to put you in the credits. he was like, no. He was really like, didn't want to ruin my one man kind of scenario.
Yeah.
But it was like, nah.
One man with a little help.
Totally. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And it was quite a lot of help, really. But,
are you gonna Are you gonna enter again in the future? And if so, are you gonna do a solo team again?
Yeah, it's. I'd be pretty tempted. To be honest, I feel like my health is only just recovering now. Like, it was pretty chronic that weekend. But because it doesn't get any easier as you get older, eh? Like,
How much sleep did you get?
it wasn't too bad. Like, I think I got on the Friday night, I got a good 3 or 4 hours or something. It wasn't too bad. I think I finished writing at like 3:30 and got up at like 7 maybe. Started shooting, so that's actually 3.5 hours, yeah.
Yeah.
And then Saturday night, I got like the classic 2.5, like, yeah. And then, so that's it, I guess.
So what will you do differently if you do it again as a solo team or as a small Empire of Reason sized team?
I think the best approach for a one-man team using a camera would be to do a one-shot film.
Right.
Do some kind of epic performance-based, hit record and then call it a day, do 16 takes and call it a day 4 hours later sort of thing, and then just focus on post. Because there's no music either in my film. If you could actually sit down and score something, that'd be pretty cool, but that was never going to happen.
Yeah, right.
But but then also, with that said, as a one-man team, if you're going to do that, then you can only have one character. So,
well, I mean, if you look at some of Taika's films, he kind of like puts a wig on or like changes his facial hair.
That's true. Oh, hang on. My son's calling me. I'll just be one tick, okay?
Sure.
I'll just leave it recording. Alright. Sheesh. Alright, sorry about that.
That's all good. We should probably start wrapping this up anyway.
Sure. Where was I?
What would you do differently next time if you're doing solo again?
Yeah, I guess I'd probably, in a nutshell, try and make it more simple in post, or try and make it faster in production, I guess.
If there are any kind of first-timers or people thinking about doing the competition for the first time, listeners, what kind of advice would you have to them, like whether they were thinking of doing it as a solo team or just in general?
I reckon the primary advice for everybody ever in 48 Hours is that ultimately it's a writing competition, really. If you can have the raddest post and the greatest looking shots in the world, but if your story sucks, it's never going to might not even get to the regional finals,
Yeah.
You've got to have a good story that's fun. I mean, it doesn't have to be fun. It can be harrowing and emotional if it's really, really good. But it's got to be good. Yeah, that's it, ultimately, I reckon, is you can shoot something completely wacky on your cell phone if you want, and that should always have the capacity to win if the story is really good. Yeah, I reckon that's the number one thing, man, for 48 Hours, is just make your story good.
What are some of your favourite films that you've seen from other teams over the years?
Right. God, they merge somewhat. It's been awesome. I've loved watching MacLeod grow over the years, and like watching watch their films are just so much fun. Like they're so good natured. There's such a good time. Squint Eastwood, I love what you guys have been doing.
Thank you.
I haven't had a chance to see your one this year. I can't wait to see it.
You're in for a treat.
Yeah, I know. A harrowing, unethical treat. I can't wait. And let's see what else. There was that finger dance one years back.
Puppy Guts, F Dance, yeah. That was pretty good.
Yeah, the Puppy Guts, F Dance, yeah. That was awesome times. So it was one of those ones where you look at it and you just go, yeah, genius. Where you just go, you guys came up with a great idea.
There's a certain spirit, isn't there, to 48-hour films?
Yeah, totally. And I mean, one of the greatest goals when you're making a 48-hour film, and it's another kind of good guide as well, is if you can make a film that can survive outside the competition. If you can make a film that stands up as a short film in its own right, that's kind of a really awesome achievement. Like we've had one of our best little gauges of our own success over the years has been a couple, first Half a Horse blew our minds when it actually survived. It won a comedy film fest somewhere, and The Sleeping Plot had a little bit of success as a short film as well outside 48 Hours, and that's so awesome because it makes it more sustainable, and it just shows that you're not bound by the competition. But with that said, some of my 48 hour films, like I haven't actually done it this year, and I haven't actually done it for a few years, unfortunately. But going along to the heats, and just some of my favourites, in fact, a lot of my favourites have been the crazy stuff that people make and submit, in 48 hours that just boggles your mind with what part of a human brain can come up with that. The high school team stuff, that sort of like getting into the depths of the sort of teenage psyche and stuff that it's so much fun. Like, it cracks you up too. And shonky camera work and stuff and bad sound. I love all of that.
That's great.
It cracks me up.
Well, Richard, I could talk to you about this kind of stuff for hours, but we better wrap this up. Thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. It's been great.
Sweet, man. Thanks. Thanks for having me, and good to talk to you. And I'll catch you probably next time you're in New Zealand, hopefully.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. Richard had a huge challenge this year, and I loved hearing how he overcame the challenges of filming himself. In next week's episode, Richard Falkner will talk to MacLeod, the 2017 Wellington winners, about the history of MacLeod and winning the Wellington final. If you enjoyed this episode, you can follow us on SoundCloud or subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. You can also find more about the 48 Hours on our website, 48hours.co.nz.